All right, so it is noon, so we're just going to get going. I would just like to say thank you for everyone for joining us today for Powerful Formulas in Excel. I am Stephanie Bergen, and I'll be your moderator for this event. I'm going to keep this pretty short so we can just get going. But today we have Mr. Bill Jelen. Bill is the host of MrExcel.com and the author of 64 books about Microsoft Excel, including Excel Gurus Gone Wild, Pivot Table, Data Crunching, and Excel Inside Out. He has made over 80 guest appearances on TV's Call for Help with Leo Laporte and was voted Guest of the Year on the Computer America radio show. He has produced over 2,400 episodes of his Excel video podcast, Learn Excel from Mr. Excel. And before founding Mr. Excel in 1998, Jelen spent 12 years in the trenches as a financial analyst, the accounting, finance, marketing, and operations departments of a publicly held company. And some basic housekeeping stuff. At the end of the webinar, there will be a really quick survey, and if your participation will be greatly appreciated. And of course, we will send the slides and recording within the next 24 hours after this webinar. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or your account manager. And as a reminder, you must complete 3 out of the 4 live poll questions during this webinar in order to receive your CPE credit. And Bill will be emailing those certificates within 1 week after this webinar. And so a little bit about MoreFraps. MoreFraps is a certified Microsoft and Oracle partner offering 24/7 global support coverage for over 400 customers and 34,000 end users. We offer nearly 30 out-of-the-box wizards built specifically for organizations running on Oracle E-Business Suite and Oracle Fusion Cloud applications. And if you're going to be coming to Oracle Cloud World this year, we will be there. So if you're attending, be sure to stop by, visit us for demonstrations, some hands-on experience, and of course, some free swag. Can't go wrong with that. And without further ado, Bill, you can take it over.
Awesome. All right, Stephanie, thanks for hosting this event and inviting me here today. I always enjoy these webinars with MoreFraps. Just gives me a chance to talk about cool stuff in Excel that hopefully everyone will enjoy. Let me share my screen. And let's see. There we go. So you should see the Excel file over here. The plan today is we're going to get started. I think we're going to cover 20 functions in Excel, 20 different formula functions in Excel, if we have time to get through them all, from XLOOKUP, sort, filter, unique, some great new functions. They gave us 14 new functions last year that let us deal with text, stacking arrays, array shaping, image. Let is super powerful, and Lambda is even more powerful. I don't get a chance to talk about Lambda. Usually we run out of time, but today I'll show you some cool Lambda functions and easier ways to create Lambdas. When Lambdas came out, they were just scary, just flat out scary. From the name was scary, everything about Lambdas were scary. But now the people over in Cambridge, England, the Microsoft Garage project have created easier ways to create Lambdas. And hopefully it'll open up to more people. Take a look at this list of functions, the 20 functions. If we go back 5 years, none of these functions, well, except for cell, number 10, cell existed 5 years ago. But all of these others are new. Excel finally crossed over the 500 function barrier. I remember back in the day, they were like 260, and then slowly up into the 400s. They finally got up over 500 different functions. Now, if you've been here before, you probably have already downloaded my book, Mr. Excel, Boosting Excel. But in case this is your first time here, I'm going to put it in the chat window, the link to that, so you can download that book. Everything we talk about today, well, most of the things we talk about today are in the book and the page number here. For the agenda. Also, I love this. Yesterday was August 8th, which typically is a very special day in ESPN world. On August 8th, the 8th of August, 8/8, they typically have a day of what they call seldom seen sports. And for the second year, Microsoft Excel has made it into that ESPN broadcast. All right, so there was a 30-minute Excel competition last Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern time. 2 years ago, we were at 4 a.m., so that was a big improvement. I will put the link to that 30-minute in the chat as well. This is actually just a lot of fun to watch. to watch these people competing to try and solve an Excel problem. So check that out. I always made a joke that someday Excel would be in the Olympics, and I never thought it would happen, but it's like, it's actually kind of, ESPN. It's actually ESPN2, but I don't care. It's still ESPN. So it's really, really awesome. All right. So let's dive in here. I'm going to cover XLOOKUP first. And even if you've been here before for XLOOKUP, this is going to have some great new things that really recently just came out with XLOOKUP. So, typically if I had everyone here in a room, I would ask how many of you know VLOOKUP, be a lot of hands would go up. And then how many of you know index and match, and it'd be less hands. Typically 80% of the people who are doing one of those are doing VLOOKUPs, and maybe 15 to 20% are doing index and match. And I get it for the index and match people. Index and match was better. It could do things that VLOOKUP couldn't do. But for me, VLOOKUP was easier to explain. A guy on the Excel team named Joe McDade knew that these two different camps were out there, the VLOOKUP people and the index and match people. And he decided to make a new function that would be so good that both camps would flock to this, right? So we have the XLOOKUP function. There were 12 benefits before. I just added a new one today. All right, so let's just talk about how XLOOKUP works compared to VLOOKUP, or actually we'll compare it to index and match in a little bit. So typically, if we have two lists, this long list on the left-hand side is like an invoice register or something like that. We'd use an equal VLOOKUP, and we'd be looking up the item number in A5, comma, and then in VLOOKUP, we would point to the entire table like this, press F4 to lock that down, and then tell it which column we wanted. If I was looking for price, I think that'd be column 3. And then mysteriously, every VLOOKUP had to end in false, or you would get wrong answers sometimes, right? So that's the typical VLOOKUP. XLOOKUP is going to feel a lot, very similar with actually two changes, all right? So we're going to start off with XLOOKUP. And this is looking up A5. So that's just like before, but here's the one difference. Instead of pointing to that entire rectangular range, like we would do with VLOOKUP or index and match, actually, not even index and match, just with VLOOKUP, we point to that entire range. Instead, we're just going to point to the range that has the things we're looking up. So I'm looking for item number W25-6. That's here in column L. I'm still going to press F4 to lock that down because I'm going to copy this formula. And then the third argument is what I want to return. So I want to return the price in this case. So I'll make sure to choose the same size range. I'll press F4. That fourth argument in VLOOKUP, the comma false to ask for an exact match, that's automatic. We don't have to do that anymore. It's just assumed that, they kind of do user testing at Microsoft. 99% of the people who were doing VLOOKUP were ending it in comma false. They said, well, let's just make that be the default. So we have a shorter function. All right, so exact match is automatic. And then the nice thing, the index and match people would always say, oh, you VLOOKUP people, it's too fragile. It's too brittle. Someone's going to break it if they insert a new column here between column L and column M. And my answer to that is, well, we're not going to insert a column between L and M, but that would have caused VLOOKUP to break. But it doesn't cause XLOOKUP to break because that third argument in XLOOKUP is pointing to a range instead of the integer number 3. It's smart enough that when that range moves, it continues to work. So it gets rid of that perceived weakness of VLOOKUP, that it was too brittle or too fragile, right? So there's two benefits right there. If you've been around Excel for a long time, you remember back in the day where we would get a new version of Excel every 3 years. Excel 2007, 2010, 2013, 2016, 2019, 2021. But what I really like is Microsoft 365. This is where everyone just gets the updates. And what they do is they have these two groups of people who just have to have the latest and greatest, the Microsoft insiders, the beta and the monthly. And those people will get features first. So let's say there's 1 million people in Microsoft insiders. When XLOOKUP was released, I very quickly created a video on my YouTube channel, and a guy that I know, his name is Rico from Scotland. He put a comment and he said, they really missed an opportunity here. Why didn't they build the logic for if NA right into the function? And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. That would have been great. And so I sent a note to Joe McDade on the Excel team, and he did it. He incorporated if NA right into the function. which is great. Back in the days when a new version came out every 3 years, you could never, like once it came out, it was out. There was nothing you could do. But now that it comes out to this small group, they're willing to change the function in response to ideas from the small group. And so we have an optional fourth argument here called if not found. If I just need those NAs to become 0, let's say, I can add the if not found argument and double click and copy it down, or put anything I want there, like in quotes, not found, or something like that. So if NA as the optional fourth argument, and I'm going to take credit. Actually, I'm going to take credit for introducing Rico to the guy on the Excel team who had that idea. Every time I get a comment from Rico, I always say, hey, yeah, you're famous because of your ability to get that feature built into the XLOOKUP function. Okay, this one is brand new. And a shout out to my friend Layla Garani, who has an awesome YouTube channel about Excel. I was watching one of Layla's videos and she uncovered this little bit of goodness with XLOOKUP, which just blew me away. All right. So if you're fans when you were younger of the board game called Clue, right? We had it was a game you're trying to figure out who did it, right? Colonel Mustard, Miss Scarlet, Mr. Green, Mrs. Peacock, Mrs. White. I haven't played this game in 40 years, but went and looked them all up this morning. And I was surprised, Miss Peach, we didn't have that when we were kids. And Dr. Orchid, we didn't have her when we were kids. They've changed some of the characters around. Okay, and what we have here in column B is something brand new in Excel. Typically in the past, we would always insert an image and that image was kind of floating on top of the grid. But they've introduced something new here under insert pictures where we could either place over cells, which is what we were doing before, or place in cell. And when you place it in the cell, it becomes like kind of this amazing new data type, let's say, right? So I've placed these images into the cell, and over here, I have a lookup table, right? So I have the picture in column B and the name of the person in column A. Check out this amazing thing that Layla discovered works, equal XLOOKUP, right? And what am I going to look up? I'm going to look up the picture, right? I want Excel to go find that picture in this range of pictures over here. I'm not going to copy it, so I don't even have to press F4. And then I can either get the full name from column C, or I can get the name in the board game from column A. And check this out. So that is Miss Scarlet. I was blown away when Layla did this, and I'm just blown away by the fact that Layla even thought that that would work. So check that out. You can now use XLOOKUP, feed XLOOKUP a picture, and have it return the name from the table. Just really crazy. Let's change to someone else. There's Mrs. Peacock, right? So that little index function there is changing the picture, and just working. Just wild. Just wild that works. Okay, now for the index and match, folks. I get it. Index and match did things that VLOOKUP couldn't do. VLOOKUP could either find an exact match or just smaller. Match, of course, could find just smaller or just larger. And that's been built into XLOOKUP. We have the ability to find the number just larger or just smaller. Just be aware that it's reverse of what you're used to. The match people will remember that positive one was less than and negative one was greater than. And Joe said that just didn't make any sense. So -1 is now for the next smaller item, and 1 is for the next larger item. For this to work with match, the data had to be sorted, ascending for less than or descending for greater than. That's no longer required. It just works. The table can be sorted however you want. The numbers don't have to be in sequence, and it works. Okay, VLOOKUP, of course, the V stands for vertical, and there's an HLOOKUP where your table is going the wrong way. I never used HLOOKUP. I would just take that data and paste special transpose it back into a vertical table. But XLOOKUP has no problem going across. That works great. Here's an interesting one. This is probably my first really favorite weird benefit of XLOOKUP. VLOOKUP would always start at the top of the table and go down and find the first item that matched. But sometimes you have a situation where you want to find the last item that matched. And the person that I ran into that did this, they were actually a horse farm in England. They were breeding race horses. And on the farm, they had a bunch of trucks. Every time the truck came in to get fuel, they would log the date and the mileage. So they knew how many miles that truck had. But their VLOOKUP, they had to look from the bottom, right? And when I created that video for them 8 years ago, it was really hard that day to have VLOOKUP go from the bottom. I don't even remember how I did it. It was a long 7-minute video. They were so thrilled with that. They actually said, hey, the next horse that's born here, we're going to name MrExcel in honor of this formula, which initially I thought was cool. But then, you go out and Google MrExcel to see, if you're being mentioned anywhere. And I was showing up in British horse racing results, for a year or two until that horse retired. Anyway, so we want to find the last item. So I'm going to do an XLOOKUP. I'm going to look for red Ford truck. We're looking in this range. I don't know why I'm going from the bottom. I didn't have to do that, comma, and I want to return the last mileage. All right, comma, and then if not found is going to be blank. The match mode is going to be 0 for an exact match. And I'm going to search last to first. So a -1 as the search mode. We'll find the value from the bottom. So red Ford truck is 83,250. All right, that's a cool one. This next one, this is so weird. I never realized that VLOOKUP, when you're doing a VLOOKUP, it was treating wildcard characters. That's an asterisk, a question mark, and the tilde right here were being treated as wildcards. So there's a good chance that you might get wrong results. Like if you were looking for wall star mart, you might get wallboard mart instead. XLOOKUP by default turns that off. It's just going to look for the asterisk or the question mark or the tilde. If you need to do a wildcard search, you can come in here and find this match type of, to use a wildcard. All right, but right here, this is the one. This is the one that's really the amazing thing about XLOOKUP. When the VLOOKUP people had to do 12 months of VLOOKUP, or worse, 52 weeks of VLOOKUP, it was such a pain because we had to edit each formula. We had to change that 2 to a 3, and then change the 3 to a 4, the 4 to a 5, and so on all the way out. There were other ways to do this. You could use the column function there, or just hide the numbers somewhere down here in a hidden row. That's the one I used all the time. And the index and match people, they could do this so well. They would put a match function in a hidden column B, one index formula, and copy it across, and it just worked. But here is the amazing thing about XLOOKUP. So I'm going to do an XLOOKUP where I need to get all 12 months. I'm looking up A308, and I'm looking in this first column of my lookup table. I'll press F4 to lock that down. Right now, this is the part where we're going to return January, but I'm not going to get just January. I'm going to get all 12 months. So here at the return array, I'm going to specify 12 columns wide by some huge number of rows tall. And check this out. This one formula returns all of the answers, which is just amazing, right? It's so fast now because VLOOKUP would go look up A308 for January, and then it'd go do it again for February, and then March, and then April. Well, now this just does it once and it returns the whole array. And, it's faster even than index and match. One last thing here that VLOOKUP can do, and this is probably useful for people that are dealing with a chart of accounts in an accounting function. So here I want to look up from fig to orange. And so the XLOOKUP for fig tells me that fig is 30, right? That's good. The XLOOKUP for orange tells me that orange is 75, but I don't want just the first one and the last one. I want everything from fig to orange, right? And this is so weird. There are 7 functions that had a secret power that if you put that function next to a colon, the formula would change its behavior. And instead of returning the number 30, it would return the cell where it was found. So in this case, it would return B9. And so check out this formula here. I have the first XLOOKUP that should be returning 30, but then a colon, and then the other XLOOKUP that should be returning 75. I'm going to turn on evaluate formula here, and we're going to watch this get calculated. This is a great little formula debugging trick back here on the formulas tab. Evaluate formula is a little magnifying glass over the script letter FX. And I can watch this get calculated one step at a time. So right here, it's going to do the XLOOKUP for fig, which right in the cell is returning the number 30. But because there's a colon next to it, it returns B9. It returns the cell reference where it's found. And then the second XLOOKUP is going to return B18. So now check this out. I'm going to sum everything from B9 to B18 and get the answer of 525, which if I select all of these, put down here in the status bar, the sum is 525. It's actually it actually works, right? So just an amazing set of benefits to XLOOKUP. All right, so 4 CPE questions today. Let's go ahead and put that first CPE question up.
I will do.
All right. Okay, question number 1. What's your favorite XLOOKUP feature? A, search from the bottom. B, the if and a is built right in. C, return 12 months of results. Or D, return an entire range of cost centers. Leave that up there.
There's also some comments and questions about XLOOKUP if you want to look at that too.
Sure, yeah. Let's see if I can.
And just a reminder, like I said, I'll send everything afterwards. I know we had some glitches with the chat, but I'm going to send the YouTube video, his book, everything you need.
Right,
So don't worry.
great. And these Excel files too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the workbook, all of it. Cool.
So is
ready
XLOOKUP? Yeah, let's so great question here from David. Is the true version of XLOOKUP slower? It's actually interesting. They're building an index in memory. Like that was one of the reasons that match with true was so fast, is that it was doing a binary search. But what they're doing, especially if you have a range of XLOOKUPs, it's actually building an index first and then attacking the whole thing. And it's on par calculation wise with the match true. All right, thanks. And then Fernando points out that XLOOKUP doesn't work back in compatibility mode, and I don't have any workaround for that. Yeah, so. Okay, how are we doing on the, we're up to almost 80% on poll question number 1.
These are the results right here.
Oh, great. Okay, good. So if and a built in, about 45%, and return 12 months of results, 38%. Those are great answers. Of course, any answer there is a great answer. That's just fine. Okay, good. I'm going to jump ahead to the new text functions. These are part of the 14 functions that came out last year for insiders, and earlier this year for all of the Microsoft 365 people. And before I get to the new ones, let's talk about a function that's just been around forever, going back to February 2017, called text join. Text join is a great way to take a bunch of text and concatenate it together, but it doesn't do, I know we've had this weird function called concatenate forever, where you can specify multiple things, and even the concat function, which is a little bit shorter. But the problem with the concat is that it just jams everything together into one, like there's no spaces in between, right? Which, when this came out, I was like, I'll never have a chance to use that. But there have been times in the last 6 or 7 years where I did have to do that. But most of the time I want to do something called a text join. So check out this amazing text join here. We get to specify what the delimiter is, whether we want to ignore empty, and then what we want to join together. So if I would just do text join, let's see, with a comma space in between, and I'll leave the ignore empty blank, and I just choose a bunch of names here, it puts everybody with commas in between, and that's great. I could put that, for example, in the to line of an email if they were email addresses. All kinds of great uses for this. But one of the cool things about this is that in the list of what names to use, we can have an if statement out there. So go look through all of these RSVPs and see if they said yes. If they did say yes, give me the corresponding name from A2 to A27. And then if they didn't say yes, in other words, they said no or nothing yet, we'll just put a quote, and that gives me a list of just the people that said yes. So let's take Chris, who's the second person here, and change Chris to a no. And you see that it automatically updates to give us just the people who were there. This came out in February 2017, and I love text join, but right away we said to Microsoft, oh, we need text split. We need the opposite. And they demoed it pretty quick. I saw a demo maybe 4 years ago, but it took forever for the thing to come out. And what drove me crazy about this is every time on my YouTube channel that someone sent in a question, that text split would have made life so easy, and I had to go through some horrendous set of steps. I was like, if Microsoft would just give us text split. Well, it's finally here. So we got 3 things came out the day that text split came out: text split, text before, and text after. Huge fan of text split, and I said I don't need text before or text after. Text split does everything I need. But I was surprised once I started to use them, how that worked. All right, so right here we have that same list that I grabbed from text join. Like someone sent me that, And now I need to do something. I need to break it back out. And so with TEXTSPLIT, we specify input text and then what to break it into new columns and how to break it into new rows. I never expected they would give me rows, right? And that turns out to be really nice. Ignore empty in case there were 2 commas in a row, we won't get a blank. And then pad width is, we'll have to talk about pad width at a later, an example a few sheets from now. So for right now, we're going to ignore pad width. So let's say that I just want to split that data into columns. So text split, we're going to point to that cell, and the column delimiter is going to be comma space. And what we get is a horizontal list of all the people that are up here, but in individual cells. Now, I don't like data going across. I'd rather transpose that. And of course, I could use the transpose function there. But it's really nice that the text split has, both the column delimiter and a row delimiter. And the row delimiter says, anytime I see a comma space, move that to a new row, which now gives me a nice vertical set of answers like that, right? So it can either create horizontal or vertical. All right, one of the just items in the description for this is I'll show you how to do text to columns with a formula instead of actually doing text to columns. So here someone sent us this data, maybe it was a CSV file, I don't know. We ended up with 4 fields and then just a simple little text split at the comma will do essentially what data text to columns would do, except it does it with a formula and it leaves the original data there, so I can do whatever I need to do. All right, now here's a crazy example. I took out the transcript from one of my YouTube videos, and this is just some paragraphs of things that I said, and I said, all right, let's see if we can break these into sentences. So this one cell, I'm using text split here. It's saying that the row separator is a period, right? And that's great. So it takes each of the sentences and it puts them on a separate row. I don't really like that it's giving me a space before each one of these. Maybe I'd wrap it in the trim function or something like that. But it's still cool, except for I noticed down here that the transcript has some questions, like I must have asked a question. And so that's not being broken out. So check this out. I want to show these 2 formulas here. The first formula, I'm saying the delimiter is a period, but if I want to use a period or a question mark, you have to wrap it in curly braces, right? I haven't seen these since high school math. I don't think the curly brace is on the keyboard. It's the left square bracket. You shift that to get the left curly brace. And inside the curly brace, I would say I want to break it at either the period or the question mark. So I can do either one. And now you see that I get the question mark. The questions are broken out into sentences as well. All right. And then I'm going to take that formula and add a split into new columns at each space or comma space. So I end up with this huge list of words down here. And this is where that pad width comes in to play, right? So the longest sentence was maybe 11 words. And Joe McDade and the Excel Calc team, they have this crazy thing that if one of the sentences had 11 words, they should all have 11 words, which of course isn't how the world works. And so Joe would fill the blank cells with NA. Actually, hang on, right here. The pad width. He would fill those blank cells with NAs out there. And I just hate NAs. NAs are terrible. So the pad width says, hey, if there's sentences that aren't as long as the others, just put a quote there. Oh, it's something. Put a quote, and we get rid of those NAs. All right. So those are some really cool functions that allow us to take data and either break it into new columns or into new rows, or in this case, both columns and rows. All right, now here real quick, you're going to get a couple new functions you've never seen before. The new function called TOCOL, TOCOL, will take a rectangular range of data and unroll it, unwind it into a single column. So many times I have just this list of crazy things. I need to break it into just one column of data. They also gave us 2 row, which of course I'm not a fan of because it's a long horizontal row. And then take the unique of that, the unique function, and then a little count if here for each of these words. How many times was that word use. COUNTIF, of course, is an old function of Debian. It's been around since what, 2007, I think. Okay, but now here, check this out. So now I have these two arrays. I have this array of unique words and the array of the count of all of those words. And I want to put those two arrays together into a single array. So a new function that just came out this year called HStack. It's a horizontal stack. I'm going to take that first array, the one in D50, and by the way, the hash there, the number sign, it means get the whole array, and horizontal stack it with F50. And so now I have this one single array that I can do things with. All right, the sort function, I think we've talked about that before. We'll take the data and sort it by the second column, descending, -1 is descending. And then the only problem I have is there's a whole bunch of quotes. Like those are the words at the end of the sentence that were too short. The sentence didn't have 11 words. And so we got a bunch of quotes out there. And I just hate that one. Like that's ugly. I don't want that in my result. And they gave us this great function called drop. And drop says, we're going to drop how many rows to drop, right? So I have one ugly row up here that I want to get rid of. And I'm just going to take the drop of that row. All right. How cool is that? I now have a word count from that paragraph. I'm surprised that basically didn't show up because people tell me that I say basically all the time. I don't know if it's true that there's really a drinking game where people on my YouTube channel take a shot every time I say the word basically, but don't do that at work. It would be terrible. Okay. All right. So that's TEXTSPLIT. Beautiful function. These two other functions that they gave us, text before and text after, I initially was like, I don't need that, right? If I have a dash in the middle of a part number, I know how to use the function called find, the find function to figure out where the dash is, and then the left function or the mid function to break that apart. I've been doing that for 20 years. I don't need text before and text after, but sure, it's easier to say, I want everything before the dash or everything after the dash, right? I liked the fact that it was geeky to have to know how to use find and left or find and mid, possibly with the len function. But this is all just so much easier. So good for them. All right, here's a very interesting thing. Another shout out here to a friend of mine in England named Charles Williams. Charles actually wrote text before and text after long before Microsoft did. He sells an add-in with 89 new functions. He's had this function for a long time. And in his function, he said, we might not have just one dash, we might have multiple dashes. And wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to say which dash we wanted? So here, this 2 is called the instance number. Which dash are you looking for? So in this case, I'm getting everything before the second dash, which is cool. But Charles had this great idea that what if you wanted to count from the end? If you just wanted to find the last dash, we don't know how many dashes there are. You wanted to count from the end. So we could use -1 to count from the end. So like, here's some sentences. We don't know how many words there are in each sentence. If I use -1, it will give me the last word. Great little bit of just cool idea from Charles. And I'm glad that the people at Microsoft took Charles' convention and used it when they created the function. There have been times where we've been begging Microsoft to give us a function. And the one way to get that function for sure is to have the people over at Google to add it to Sheets, right? That puts a lot of pressure. But the other way is to have Charles Williams add it to his formula. And the best things from Charles add-in, they tend to put in Excel. So thanks to Charles for leading the way on that one. Here's just one crazy function that got a lot easier thanks to text after or text before. Lots of times we want to have a formula to get the sheet name. So right here, I'm on a sheet that's called February report. And when I copy that and make March report, I want to have that up in a cell. Like this is the report for March, or whatever. And the great function called equals cell of file name will return the entire hard drive path, the workbook name in square brackets, and then after that last right square bracket, the name of the sheet that we're on. So Feb report, right? So in the past, in the earlier versions of the book, I have a really complicated formula where I look for that last square bracket, take everything after that, trim it, and I was able to get just the sheet name. Well, that becomes so much simpler now because we just use the text after the final square bracket, and it will get the sheet name, right? So that item that's been in the book forever now became very simple and almost something that I can explain instead of this, which I could never remember. All right, good. That brings us to our second CPE question.
Sounds good. I'll pull it up.
Great, thanks. All right, question number 2. Which function does text to columns in a formula? Is it A, parse, B, break, C, split, or D, text split?
Just gonna wait a little bit more.
All right.
If you want your CPE credit,
Yeah.
let's try to answer.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna end it.
Good. Text split.
Yeah.
That is the right answer. The right answer. Okay, great. We're gonna move on here to 6 new functions. VStack and HStack are array stacking functions, and then functions to choose from an array. Over here on the left-hand side, I have this large database of customers and sector, date, revenue. And I'm pretty proud of these little functions here that use the new filter function to go through and get all of the manufacturing customers, right? So the filter function, from 2019, it's one of those new functions, a sort, filter, and unique that came out. When they came out, they were super cool because we could filter with a formula. And of course, if this would change from manufacturing to financial, right? So it just refilters on the fly, as opposed to the regular filter where you need someone to go actually, open a little drop-down box. This allows you to build dashboards where people don't have to actually choose something. So I have 2 formulas here, the manufacturing and the retail, and I get the yellow array and I get the orange array. But what I really need is I need either manufacturing or retail, right? So the amazing new function they gave us is called VStack for a vertical stack. You can put as many arrays in there as you want. I'm going to VStack everything that starts in G4 with the array that starts in J4. And I get this really large blue array here of items in either the left list or after that, the right list. So I got all the manufacturing and retail customers. Pretty cool. I can use this new array now in M4 and just sum that. So M4 hash, I get the total of all of those. I can take that total and HStack it with the word total, right? Look at that. Just to get the word total and the total in 2 columns next to each other. Here's some headings. And then I'm going to VStack 3 things, the headings array, the big array over here in M, and the total array. And I've now built this crazy report on the fly, VStacking, the headings, the data that I got from my great formulas, and then the total. And I'm even sorting the middle array as I go, right? So when sort, filter, and unique came out, they were great, but then you're like, oh, I really want a total at the bottom of that. And that was hard to do. Well, now, thanks to HStack and VStack, we can do that. Other times, you would get an array and you'd be like, this is almost what I want, but there's an annoying total on the right-hand side or an annoying total at the bottom. So they gave us drop. Drop will allow us to drop the first or last rows or first or last column. So here in this original array, I have the total column in column L, and I'm going to drop that. I don't want that. So I ask for the drop of that array, and for which row to get rid of, I leave it blank, which column. It's that same Charles Williams trick where -1 means count from the end. So like next month, when I have April or May or June in there, and I don't know how many rows there are going to be, I just say, get rid of the rightmost column for me. Or here, if I don't want the headings for some reason, I can drop the first row, right? So, these are nice little functions that make those other array functions just better. So here I've gotten rid of the last row. So one formula to get rid of the first row, another formula to get rid of the last row. The opposite of that is take, which gives me just the first row or just the last row. So down here, take, I want the first row, or to get the last row, I ask for the -1 row, which will give me the last row. And then I can VStack those back together, right? So these are just, they're I don't want to call them helper functions, but they're functions that really, after we lived with sort, filter, and unique for a couple of years, and you just found rough edges where it's hard to do things, gave us the improvement. And then sometimes it's not things from the end that you want to get rid of or keep. You want things in the middle. So here, this gets the first and last column. This is choose columns. Choose columns. Let me make it larger. So choose columns. We ask for the first and last column. So that gets me the names and the totals. There's also choose rows. So we have choose rows, choose columns. So I talked about the first 5 of those. Expand is if you need to make an array taller or wider, you can pad with extra rows or columns. I don't have that example today. All right, so that's array stacking. And then array shaping. 4 functions here. We already looked at toCol. I'm a big fan of toCol. I use this a lot. One of the problems that came up on my YouTube channel a few years ago, 3 years ago, and there was no good solution to this. I need to get a unique list of all the meals that were ordered, and the unique function would not do it, because the unique function is looking at a person who ordered the exact same 5 meals in the exact same order, which is not, not what we use. So the toCol will take that rectangular range like this and just turn it into a single huge column like that. And then the unique of that array, and I can sort, and basically all in one formula, do the toColumn first, get unique, and then sort it. And I have an alphabetical list of items. And then I could do a COUNTIF, I suppose, to the COUNTIF to figure out how many of each of those were ordered, and then a nice little array here that I can send off using HStack, right? So that toCol and toRow will take a rectangular range and make it into a single column or single row. And then wrap does the opposite. So right here is a list of prospects. And it's just, this would be silly to print column A because most of the page would not be filled up. And so I want to put this into columns, let's say. And so it always seems a little bit backwards to me. This is wrap rows. It really should be called, I'm wrapping it into rows, and you specify how many columns you want. So with 3 columns, it's taking all those prospects and it's arranging them like this. If I would ask for 5 columns, you would get 5 columns. So you can just specify how many columns you want. And watch out, let's try it back to 3. You see those NAs, that's Joe saying, oh yeah, I gave you 3 columns in most of the rows. I feel like I need to give you 3 columns in the last row. So the pad width out there, you could just say pad width, quote, quote, and get rid of the NAs. All right, cool. All right, so that's array shaping. And let's come back to our agenda here. So we talked about VStack, HStack, array shaping. The image function, this is new, and I think I showed this the last time. It was brand new when I showed it the last time. Let's just take a quick look here. I know I started out in XLOOKUP showing you how you could use a image in an XLOOKUP table, but this is just where we want to go grab data from the internet. So I have a bunch of images up here, and I want to put that image into my dashboard. So the equal image function, just point to any URL, and it will bring that image right into the sheet. The rule here is that it makes it as large as the cell is, right? So if you start out with just a normal row height of like 9, it's going to be way too small to see. So plan on making this larger and making the column wider in order to have the image match that size. And you can do all kinds of things with this. Like you can have slicers that will change the image. That's just a regular table slicer, or even build a little dashboard. This is where I'm using wrap rows to wrap the 6 images into a nice little 3-column dashboard of those image functions. Okay, that brings us to our third polling question. If we can put that one up. Polling question number 3, which function displays a picture in a cell? Is it A, picture, B, JPEG, C, image, or D, from URL. Oh, Joel, I'm reading the questions. Joel talks about the filter functions like VLOOKUP on steroids. It returns all of the results of a lookup value. Yeah, it is awesome, isn't it? That is a great one.
Can you see the results?
Oh, there we are. Yep. Great. Good. So image 89%. That's perfect. Okay. Next up, an amazing new function called let. This function is actually there for people that have Office 2021 or Microsoft 365. So it's been around for a fairly long time, in that it's actually made it to one of what they call the perpetual editions. You know, those are the editions that come out every three years and are not updated, which is how we all bought Office back in the day. And when they came out with this crazy idea of renting Office, I'm like, I'm never going to do that. But then when I realized that renting Office gets you features 2 or 3 years before buying the perpetual, you know, I was a big fan of it. Let is great. Anytime that you have a complex operation where you do like a little sub formula that does half of the thing or a third of the thing, and then you have to refer to those results in the next step. This is a question that just came in on Monday of this week. I don't have the person's real data, thankfully. They just described that they had a large data set, lots of rows, lots of columns. And anytime he saw the word CVE-2023, he needed to extract that, you know, from wherever it was. He just needed a list of all the things that said CVE. You know, so it's tricky. But one of the great things that we just talked about, is this new TOCOL, TOCOL function. We'll take that large range at the top and just give me one big range of all of those answers unwound into a single column. See, and then what I can do is I can use the filter function, take all of that column of data and filter to where the left 8 characters say CVE 2023. And that gets me this list right here, which is great, right? And then, you know, so people send me questions and I want to send them a nice, efficient solution back. I feel bad saying, oh, you're going to have to do this in 2 columns. So I'm like, okay, how can I put this back together into one big column? And you see my heading here of, ugh, right? This is a horrible formula because I'm going to do the expensive TOCOL function twice. First in the first argument of filter, and then in the which rows do I want, I'm going to, you know, do it inside the left again, which means that they're going to have to unwind this twice. It's just an ugly thing, right? So here's what let will let us do. We start out with the let, and I know that first thing that I need is the TOCOL function, and I'm going to give that a name. Now, if I was really going to use this for the next 20 years, I would give it a great name like all data in one column, you know, but instead I'm lazy and I'm just going to call it A, right? So there's a variable called A, and that variable is going to hold the answer from TOCOL. So I'll select this whole range here. Let's go back to our formula. So I have a variable called A. That variable is the TOCOL. And then I could create more variables, but in this case, I don't have them. So now I finally got down to what's the calculation. So the calculation is the filter of A. Remember, A is in memory. It's all of that range is separated into a column. And I want to filter to where the left of A, comma 8 is equal to CVE-2023. Hope I got that right. Close the filter, close the let. And yeah, I should sort that whole thing. Then sort the whole thing. Yep. All right, so check that out. Inside of let, I was able to say, here's a variable called A, and it means this. And then when I have to reuse that later in the formula, it has only calculated it once. It calculated it and stored it in this named range called A. And then I was able to refer to it again as A, right? Makes that formula faster for the first thing, and possibly easier to explain. Possibly easier to explain. You know, if the person's never seen the let before, I'll kind of have to explain it. But it's definitely a cool, nice improvement that they gave us, the let function. Now I'm going to revisit let in a minute, but I'm going to get even more crazy with a scary function called lambda. Lambda is where you have a calculation that you're doing all the time at work, and it's not built into Excel. You know, I don't know what it is. And in the past, you'd have to do a VBA user-defined function with this, which means that the other person has to enable VBA. Oh, geez, if you send it to someone who's using it in Excel online, VBA will never work there. So this new lambda works cross-platform, which means mobile and web, maybe even on the phone, you know, if they're opening it on their phone. The one thing that I just despise about this is that it has to be stored in the name manager. All right. Yeah, that name. It's funny, when Google Sheets stole this from Excel and put it into Google Sheets, they wouldn't call it lambda. They thought it was too weird, right? And they call it name formula or something like that. But here's the deal. You've all heard of this guy, Alan Turing. You might have heard of a Turing machine. He was the first person to actually make a computer, like, I don't know, back in 1934 or something like that. This long tape, and you know, they say something is Turing complete if you can basically solve it with this guy's computer from 1934. We've all heard of him, I think. Alan Turing died very young at the age of 41 in 1954. Okay, so I'm starting with him as a reference point. His professor, like the guy that helped him get a PhD, is a guy named Alonzo Church. And I actually appreciate this guy. Alonzo Church, after leaving Cambridge, he lived a long time, till 92, and he taught at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, and lived in Hudson, Ohio, which was probably about 15 miles from where we lived. We used to have dinner in Hudson, Ohio. In my mind, I've eaten at the same Denny's as this guy. Like, you know, I didn't know him, right? But you know, he lived a long time. His name is Alonzo Church, and he's famous for inventing something called lambda calculus, right? So Microsoft naming this function lambda is a tip of the hat to this guy named Alonzo Church, right? When I heard that whole story, I'm like, okay, it's a weird name, but I'm going to let it go just because, you know, there's history here. There's reasons for this. All right, so let's just create the world's simplest lambda. Pythagorean theorem. We have a right triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The c squared is the hypotenuse. So, you know, we have side A and side B, and I need to figure out the hypotenuse. So take 3 squared plus 4 squared, add those together, and take the square root of the whole thing. Well, rather than build that logic, I just want a simple little function here called HYP for hypotenuse. And I pass it the A side and the B side, and it gives me the answer. All right. So what we do is in the lambda, we say we're going to pass you 2 variables called A and B. Square A, square B, add those together, take the square root of the whole thing. And it has to be stored in the name manager. Oh my gosh, this is insane, right? So we come in here, here's a formula called hypotenuse, here's a formula called miles. The miles, this is one, like I can figure out the hypotenuse on my own, but the miles, I have to go look this up on the internet every time, taking latitude and longitude and figuring out the number of miles between them. You know, this is one that's actually useful to me, the miles function, right? And so you store it in the name manager, and then every cell in this workbook can use those 2 functions. I can use HYP or the miles between cities. I just ask for equal miles from there to there, and it gives me latitude and longitude, and you know, it just works, right? So it's a super powerful function that's really, really hard to use. This is where we are going to enter with this amazing group of Excel developers in Cambridge, England, who created a free add-in, right? And this add-in, unfortunately, only works in Windows. It doesn't work for Mac. It doesn't work in Excel Online. It doesn't work on the phone. It doesn't work on your Commodore 64, right? So, but you come here to the Insert tab, go to Get Add-ins, and search for Excel Labs. You get this great little icon on the far right-hand side, right? So let's open Excel Labs. I think they actually have 2 tools in there right now. The Advanced Formula Environment is what we want. And I have here an interesting little formula where I have a month in sales, and I need to figure out the number of work days in that month, which is tricky. That's the net work days function, and then calculate sales per day. So this is a system of equations where I have 2 input cells and 4 formulas to get to sales per day. There is something here in advanced formula environment called add the function from the grid. So this means someone who's pretty good at Excel built these formulas, and we're going to build it into a single lambda function. So here's the range containing the calculation. It automatically figures out that those are the 2 input cells in A and B. It figures out that F is the output cell, and it's going to use the headings right above. And check this out. They actually go through and build the entire lambda and let for you, right? All of a sudden now, lambda isn't as scary because I just have to build it in several columns. And here we are, click create. And then I want to save that to the worksheet, right? So it's called sales per day. Let's just try it out here. So equal sales per day. It wants the month and it wants the sales. I hope it comes up with the same answer. Oh, it does. Look at that, right? So I just on the fly created a lambda. It saved it into the name manager for me, so I didn't have to do that. And it's just pretty wild. Okay, so our fourth poll question here is a tricky one. Let's go ahead and put that fourth poll question up. Who's the guy who invented lambda calculus? Is it Charles Turing, Alonzo Church, Alonzo Stagg, or Laszlo Toth? That great add-in is from Excel Labs. Just go to the Insert tab, get add-ins, and look for Excel Labs. They're going to add more stuff there, I'm sure, but right now that's a great one. Okay. There we are. Great. 85% of you said Alonzo Church. Very good. All right. Last little quick one here. There's been a cool trick in Excel where we want to see the answer to a formula, and you would press the F9 key. Like you would edit the formula and press F9, and it would temporarily show you that answer, 12,646. And you had to remember to press the escape key, right? And there was even a trick where you could look for just a piece of it, like choose that part and press F9, and it would calculate that part on the fly. So you could see that sub formula, all right? My friend Mike Gervin, who runs another great Excel YouTube channel called Excel is Fun, he does this all the time. He's the master of this. And he even knows how to like undo it. I think it's Control Z. Like he'll F9 a couple of times and Control Z a couple of times. He knows the rules a lot better than I do. But here's what Microsoft gave us about 2 months ago. If I select part of the formula in the formula bar, right above it, I hope you can see it, like right above the formula bar, there's an answer there showing in curly braces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 with semicolons in between. So anytime that I have any kind of a formula, like is A22 less than today, I can just select that and it says true. It is, right? So you can test a piece of the formula. And the great thing is if you just forget to press escape and just press enter, it doesn't destroy the formula, right? So, nice little improvement. Watch for that coming to Microsoft 365. Definitely not in Excel 2021 or any of the earlier versions. And we'll just close with this one, which I love. We all know about the status bar down here that shows you the sum, max, min, numerical count, count, and average. If you don't have max and min, right click on the sum and turn on max and min. You might as well have them all there. So like I need to send the average of these numbers to somebody. And I can see here that the average is 544.9. About 2 years ago in February, they gave us an amazing feature, didn't tell anyone it was there. But if you hover over that average, they say copy to clipboard. So you just left click on the average, and then you can go to anything. I'm going to right click and paste special text or Unicode text. Actually, I could have just done paste. Why didn't I just do a paste? So here, let's select these. We'll choose the max, left click, and then come here and paste Control V, and I get the value from the clipboard. In the past, I've always had to write that down or just say it out loud 3 times. Now it just works. All right. Get the the link to the book, they'll send it out tomorrow. All the workbooks I used today, they'll send out tomorrow. And check out the ESPN All-Star Battle if you're looking for 30 minutes of geekiness. There we go. All right. Stephanie, thanks so much to More for Apps for sponsoring this. Hopefully people learned a few new things along the way of these new formulas.
Well, thank you, everyone. So that concludes the webinar for today. Like Bill said, we will send the recording, all the materials, his book, and even the YouTube link. So just in case you didn't see it. So just please take a moment to complete the survey after the webinar has ended. And thank you again to Bill, and thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good one.
Thanks.
Thank you.